Picture two men walking into the same coffee shop. The first one is hard to miss. Designer sneakers, a watch that costs more than most people's monthly rent, a car parked outside that turns heads. Everything about him signals one thing: I have money. The second man sits quietly in the corner, plain clothes, no visible logos. He drove himself in a 7-year-old sedan. He orders a regular coffee and doesn't look up from his notebook. Now, here's the question. Which one has more money in the bank? If your instinct said the first one, you were taught exactly what the system wanted you to believe. Because decades of research into how real wealth actually accumulates tells a completely different story. And once you understand that story, you will never look at money, status, or the things you buy to signal success the same way again. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why the people who are genuinely building wealth so often look like the least wealthy people in the room. You're going to see the psychological mechanism that keeps most people spending money to look rich instead of building the kind of financial life that actually sets them free. And you're going to walk away with something that changes how you make decisions, not just about what you buy, but about what you're actually trying to build. Stay until the end, because the last part is the one that reframes everything. Here's a number that should stop you cold. According to GWI's luxury market research, 44% of regular luxury goods buyers have low savings, and 1 in 4 of them earns a low income. Read that again. A significant portion of the people buying designer handbags, premium sneakers, and high-end watches don't actually have the financial foundation to sustain that lifestyle. The market isn't being driven by the wealthy, it's being driven by people who want to look wealthy. And this isn't just a spending habit, it's a psychological response to social pressure. A study cited by the New Republic found something striking. In places with higher income inequality, people with less money searched more frequently online for luxury brands. Not the rich, the people watching the rich from a distance. The wider the gap between what someone has and what they see around them, the stronger the pull toward signaling that they belong on the other side of that gap. So the person buying the logo-covered jacket on a tight budget isn't being irrational. They're responding to a very real social signal, one that says appearance equals belonging and belonging equals safety. That's not a character flaw. That's a deeply human response to an environment specifically engineered to produce it, because here's what that environment looks like. Advertising doesn't sell products, it sells identities. It sells the version of yourself you could become if you owned this car, wore this watch, carried this bag. Social media algorithms reward the display of acquisition, the unboxing, the outfit, the upgrade. And the entertainment industry has spent decades teaching us that the visual language of success has a very specific vocabulary. Luxury cars, designer labels, visible excess. The result is a culture where most people can identify a $5,000 handbag on site, but couldn't tell you the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional one, where the signals of wealth are universally recognized and the actual mechanics of building it are almost completely invisible. That invisibility is not an accident, and it's exactly what the next part of this video is about. In the mid-1990s, 2 researchers named Thomas Stanley and William Danko surveyed more than 11,000 high net worth Americans. Not the ones on magazine covers, the actual ones. People with at least $1 million in net worth, living ordinary lives in ordinary places. What they found became one of the best-selling personal finance books in history. The title was The Millionaire Next Door, and the next door wasn't metaphorical. Millionaires, they discovered, are disproportionately clustered in middle-class neighborhoods, not affluent ones. The people in the biggest houses in the wealthiest zip codes were frequently not the ones with the largest balance sheets. They were the ones with the largest expenses. And expenses, no matter how impressive they look from the outside, are the opposite of wealth. 80% of the millionaires studied were first-generation affluent. No inheritance, no head start. Most drove cars at least 5 years old. Most had lived in the same home for over 2 decades. And the single most consistent trait across all of them was this: they valued financial independence over displaying social status, not as an abstract principle, as a daily financial decision. The book's finding in 4 words: wealth is accumulated, not spent. Now here's why the genuinely wealthy choose invisibility, and it goes beyond simple frugality. Warren Buffett still lives in the Omaha house he bought in 1958. Mark Zuckerberg built one of the most valuable companies on earth, wearing the same gray t-shirt every day. Jeff Bezos used to show up to major meetings in cargo shorts. None of this is accidental. Researchers at the Luxury Institute described it as deliberate invisibility because at a certain point, displaying wealth stops being a signal of success and starts being a liability. You become a target. The social performance of maintaining an image demands constant upgrading. Invisibility, paradoxically, becomes the smarter choice. And even if you never reach that level of net worth, the psychological trap underneath this is the same for everyone. Researchers call it the hedonic treadmill. A 1978 study tracked lottery winners after their windfall and found that within months, their happiness levels had returned to exactly where they were before. The external upgrade didn't shift the baseline. It just raised the floor of what felt normal, which meant the next purchase had to be bigger to generate the same feeling. Buying to signal success doesn't produce security. It produces a standard that keeps rising with no exit. So here's your checklist. 3 signs that reveal whether you're accumulating real wealth or accumulating the appearance of it. 1. Your largest monthly expenses are things other people can see. Car payment, apartment in the right neighborhood, visible wardrobe. If the biggest line items in your budget are oriented toward what strangers notice, the budget is built for performance, not accumulation. 2. You feel financial anxiety despite earning well. When spending matches or exceeds income, the salary level becomes almost irrelevant to actual security. Stanley and Danko found that many high earners had remarkably little real wealth because every raise was immediately absorbed by lifestyle expansion. 3. The thought of driving a modest car or wearing unbranded clothes feels socially uncomfortable, not impractical. Uncomfortable. That feeling is the system doing exactly what it was designed to do. And recognizing it as external pressure rather than a genuine personal preference is where the shift begins. Here's what I want you to sit with. For most of your life, the definition of financial success you were handed looked a specific way: a certain kind of car, a certain kind of a dress, clothes with the right name on them. And because that definition came from everywhere simultaneously, advertising, entertainment, social media, the culture around you, it never felt like something someone gave you. It felt like reality, like the natural shape of things. But the research tells a completely different story. The people who built lasting wealth, quietly across decades without press releases or social media posts, weren't playing that game. They were playing an entirely different one, a game where the scoreboard isn't visible to anyone walking past, where the metric isn't what you own, but what you've accumulated, where a 7-year-old car and an unbranded jacket aren't evidence of falling behind. They're evidence of a very specific, very deliberate set of financial priorities. And here's where it gets interesting. When Stanley and Danko dug into the psychology of the people they studied, one pattern kept emerging that surprised even them. Many of the high-income earners they interviewed, doctors, lawyers, executives pulling in impressive salaries, had remarkably little actual wealth. Not because they weren't earning, because every increase in income was met with an equal or greater increase in spending. Bigger house, newer car, better neighborhood. The lifestyle expanded to consume whatever the paycheck produced, and at the end of every month, despite the earnings, the foundation underneath was thinner than it appeared. Meanwhile, the millionaires next door, the ones in modest houses, driving sensible cars, were doing something structurally different. They weren't just spending less. They were operating from a completely different definition of what money was for, not a tool for signaling arrival, a tool for purchasing freedom. And that distinction, money as signal versus money as freedom, is the most important financial reframe most people never make. Because here's what nobody tells you about the performance of wealth. It has a cost that never appears on any invoice. When your financial life is organized around what others can observe, you are permanently vulnerable to their expectations. And expectations in a culture saturated with aspirational content never stop escalating. The car that felt impressive 3 years ago is ordinary now. The neighborhood that felt like an achievement becomes the baseline. The wardrobe that once turned heads gets quietly replaced. You are not building toward a destination. You're running on a surface that keeps moving. Researchers have a name for this: the hedonic treadmill. The 1978 lottery winner study showed it clearly. Massive external change, no lasting shift in baseline happiness. Because happiness doesn't live in the acquisition. It lives in the meaning you assign to what you already have. And meaning doesn't have a price tag. The genuinely wealthy figured this out, not always consciously, not always immediately, but consistently enough to show up across thousands of research subjects spanning decades. Financial independence carries no dress code. It requires no audience. It generates no likes and appears in no feed. But it produces something that no luxury purchase has ever reliably delivered: the permanent, unshakable sense that your life is not contingent on a paycheck, a promotion, or anyone else's approval. From this point forward, when you feel the pull toward a purchase that exists mainly to communicate something to someone else, you'll recognize that pull with new precision. Not as aspiration, not as reward, as a mechanism, old, well-funded, and specifically engineered to convert your future security into someone else's revenue today. That recognition doesn't mean never buying anything beautiful or meaningful. It means knowing the difference between a purchase that serves your actual life and one that serves the performance of it. One of those builds something real, the other one rents you an identity you'll have to keep paying for, and the rent always goes up. So here's what to carry forward from everything we covered today. The man in the coffee shop with the plain clothes and the 7-year-old car wasn't behind. He wasn't settling. He had simply stopped spending energy on a performance that doesn't pay dividends and redirected it towards something that does. That's not a sacrifice. That's a trade. And it's the trade that almost every person in Stanley and Danko's research had made in their own way, on their own timeline. Not because they were told to, because at some point they looked at the math and realized that every dollar spent maintaining an image is a dollar that isn't compounding somewhere on their behalf. The goal was never to look free. The goal was to actually be free. And those two things pull in opposite directions far more often than anyone in the business of selling you things would like you to notice. Here's what shifts when you internalize this. You stop measuring your progress against what's visible: other people's cars, other people's clothes, other people's curated highlight reels. You start measuring it against something much harder to fake and much more meaningful to own: your net worth, your savings rate, the number of months you could go without a paycheck and still be fine. These numbers don't photograph well. They don't generate likes. But they are the only numbers that translate directly into the thing most people say they want when they say they want to be successful: options, time, the ability to say no. The quietest people in the room are often the ones who figured that out earliest. And now, so have you. If this shifted something for you, pass it on to someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because this is the kind of conversation we come back to every week.